Good morning, afternoon, dear viewers, and welcome to Driftland: The Magic Revival, a fantasy set real-time with pause 4x, which casts you in the role of a powerful mage capable of shaping the game map with the simplest moves of your hand and a couple of shifts of your finger. Not only that, but it is the only game, as far as I know, in which buildings appearing seemingly out of nowhere not only make sense from a game world perspective, but the mechanics behind it is crucial to the overall gameplay experience. But before I dive in deeper into how Driftland works, please keep in mind to subscribe and click that bell notification button, it really helps. Driftland: The Magic Revival sets you up as a mage overlord, starting with a small castle on one of the many floating land masses that make up your world now. The planet wasn't always made up of floating islands, however, at some point in the distant past, a massive magical war erupted, almost destroying the planet. The survivors, seeing that they would almost surely be destroyed if they continue, pulled their remaining magic together and saved what was left of the planet. And that's the situation you have now, a world made up of floating islands instead of massive land masses or bodies of water, and magic has been on the down low for many ages after that massive last spell was cast. But recently, magic returned to the world, and with it, magic users. And you, my dear player, you are one such magic user. And this gives you the unique abilities required to create a more cohesive kingdom out of the various scattered islands strewn around the map. So, now that I set up the game story enough for whatever I go on to say to actually make some sense, let's start with the graphics and music. Driftland: The Magic Revival looks and moves extremely well, and that's something that's that much more important to stress when you consider that this is in fact an indie effort. It takes the realistic yet representative approach to how buildings look, meaning that the overall art design is a realistic one. However, due to the several and cool island-centric mechanics, the buildings you'll be making are more a representation of what the buildings are actually supposed to be. They are large enough to look good and make some sense in terms of gameplay, but they're not really proportioned with what the territories the islands are supposed to represent, or indeed with the individual units that you can create and who will work for you. Sound and music wise, the game's equally solid. Nothing really noteworthy in terms of music, just to say that it's a very fantasy appropriate soundtrack and it doesn't get repetitive or annoying after several hours of play. And this is a 4x after all, so several hours of play are not only suggested, they're kinda required for maximum enjoyment. This is also one of those games that really needs a tutorial. Not that there are games that can do without one, but Driftland has some very thematic mechanics that one has to understand properly in order to master their use. These are the types of things that you won't really find in titles like Civilization or even Stellaris. So the tutorial does a great job at taking you through the basics of kingdom construction and citizen management, but also shows you the basics of what your magic can do, especially in terms of the floaty islands. Thanks to your magic, you can see through the fog of war, which you'll need in order to place a portal gate on a new island. These are called Gates of Tyr, and they're great especially at the start of the game because it allows you to explore a large number of islands from afar. And exploration is a major part of the game, at least in the beginning and throughout the mid-game, because you'll not only find caches of random resources on various islands, which can be a great boon at the start of the game, but they are also where you'll find the resources you'll need to further expand, amongst other things. Once you've decided a particular island is worth investing further into, you can then use your magical powers to physically move the island closer to your already inhabited ones and connect them via bridges. The connections via the Gates of Tyr are only temporary and they do cost mana, so they're not a very efficient long-term connection method. That's what bridges are for. Keep in mind that your islands need to be connected to each other either via portals or bridges in order for you to reap the benefits of whatever resource producing buildings you have on the islands. The tutorial also introduces you to the idea that while you are this almost all-powerful mage capable of building things with just a couple of clicks and the power to move land masses at your will, the units you create are not your puppets. As such, you have to incentivize them with money rewards in order for them to do things such as exploration, geological surveys, or attacking enemies. You can do all of those things using Gates of Tyr initially, and the geological survey is crucial because you won't see all the resources that an island has to offer as soon as you clear the fog of war. you'll only see the amount of basic resources, namely wood and stone, you can produce from it. However, there are several other things you'll need in order to develop your kingdom that have to be surveyed for. Only once you know all the resources an island has to offer can you make a properly informed decision as to whether or not said island is worth you spending the resources to magic the thing close to you and connect with a bridge. Because once you connect an island to your main kingdom, even if you don't build anything on it, your building upkeep cost will go up. More land, more taxes, I guess. But more people, more taxes for sure. And here's where the main balancing act in terms of resources happens. The fundamental resources that the game is built on are your population number, food, and gold. The more people you have, the more gold they generate by paying taxes, and the more food they require. You can generate food with your particular food producing building, because each of the 4 races has its own thing, and sending some of the people to work. Problem is, all the citizens who produce any sort of resource, be it food, stone, rubies, mana, what have you, don't also pay taxes. Which means you need to constantly, and I mean constantly, keep an eye on your food and gold production and expand your population steadily but carefully so that you don't get in a situation where you either run out of food because too many extra people need to eat all of a sudden, or you empty your treasury because you've been building too many houses all of a sudden and the population isn't going fast enough to put you in the black. Now, Driftland could just have easily been a very combat-focused RTS if it weren't for the rather challenging resource management that has to be done and the fact that it has several speed settings. A great and quite crucial feature to any 4X or city builder, Driftland has a bunch of faster speeds that one can use while waiting for a particular building to finish magicking itself up or gathering some resources to, do something with them. Equally as important is the active pause feature, which has this great little effect when you push the button. The graphics get a bit blurry and there's a slowed down sound effect accompanied by a change in music pitch. It's a nice little touch that makes using the feature a bit less mundane of a thing. Even though we're dealing with a 3D environment which allows you to zoom in and out quite a bit. In fact, you can zoom out till you only see the map as a map, but there is no camera rotation in the game. This might be added later, but I have to say that it's not really a minus for the game considering how weird and abstract the connected islands get to look once you're past mid-game. I think being able to rotate the camera as well would make it a little bit too confusing. I might be wrong though. Despite you not being able to directly order your units, they will automatically attack enemies when any part of your kingdom is attacked. You will however need to incentivize them with a reward for exploration or attacking when you wish to begin the assault. Combat is mostly automatic since there is not a lot of strategy to be had considering the mechanics of the game, but the devs make up for this by giving you the power to directly attack your enemies. Every race in the game has access to a direct damage spell, a damage over time spell, a freezing spell, an area of effect spell, and a more massive spell that damages both units and structures in a large area. They all do more or less the same thing but with a different thematic flavor depending on the race you're playing. Also, considering the fact that everything happens either on or across floating islands, flying units will be the main means of attacking and defending. Interesting thing is that none of the races can actually generate their own flying units. Instead, you'll have to explore the map and find nests which generate a limited number of flying mounts, which then your combat units can get onto and fly them into battle. These mounts are really expensive and usually the nests will only generate 1 or 2 of them, with the option of increasing that number by 1 if you invest your progress points into a particular feature called extensive breeding. Now, progress points are similar to the lore points in Northgard if you remember that game review. You generate them by exploration, vanquishing your enemies, and assigning workers to a house of scholars. Then you can use them to improve one of 3 major aspects of your race: magic, warfare, or economy. Any of the options offered on these various paths, providing you with some permanent passive buffs to either your economy, your combat units, or your spells in general. Initially, you might be prone to forgetting about these points because you'll be busy, resource managing and exploring and whatnot. However, you'll discover that they can be quite useful even if the benefit they offer isn't that large to begin with, or at least it doesn't seem large at the beginning. Keep in mind though that most, if not all of them, apply to a larger number of either buildings or units, and as such, that bonus really adds up in the end. One of my favorite ones to start with is finance reform because it lowers building upkeep, thus taking a bit of the pressure off your treasury and allowing you to continue growing. So I've touched upon the decent number of spells that you have at your disposal throughout the review. I mentioned your sight and portaling spells and the combat ones, but there is a separate category of spells that only has to do with the floating islands. These spells can be used exclusively upon the islands. The most commonly used one will be the first spell that allows you to move the floating land masses around. As I said earlier, to bring a resource-rich island closer to your inhabited ones, or maybe push a small or resource-poor island away because it doesn't benefit you occupying the space. But there are a few more island-based spells that you have access to, and these tend to come in use towards the mid to late game when you have a lot of mana stored up. The second spell will allow you to terraform an island into a biome appropriate for your race. See, each race has its own particular type of island that it can thrive on. You can only build your food producing structures on appropriate islands, otherwise they won't work. Similarly, resource producing buildings will only work at half capacity if they're set on an island that does not match your race's biome. So terraforming resource rich islands is a thing that becomes quite important later in the game. Keep in mind though that you can't cast this on your own. You'll need at least one spellcasting unit active in order for it to happen. But once it does, the animation and visual effect is quite wonderful to watch. Then the third spell allows you to literally summon an island into existence. The island will match your race's biome and will have randomly generated resources. There's not much here to say about that. But the last spell allows you to completely destroy islands. This one is an incredibly costly spell, but it is a great way of assuring that an enemy doesn't get a foothold back on an island which you've already razed to the ground. On the other hand, there is a cheaper way of doing that, and this is one very cool combat option possible, only in this game. You can simply steal an enemy's islands if you manage to destroy the bridges connecting it with the other islands and then casting the first spell to move it away from his influence and then connecting it to your floating island archipelago. For now, the game is still in early access and it might still be there for a while. The developers are working on adding the fourth and final race to the game, as well as adding a bunch of other features such as multiplayer and campaigns for each of the races.